The Earley Show will begin after a brief word from today's sponsor, Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our 24/7 virtual receptionist team.
Answering Legal has been pivotal to allow our virtual law firm to thrive. Without them, we would not be able to handle the call volume that comes to our law firm. We needed a service that would allow us to be able to take those messages, yet still focus on working with our clients and be able to call them back. Answering Legal has been phenomenal on getting a great customer service relationship with people that are calling into the firm, taking messages, giving us those messages, and we can get back to them very shortly.
Hi everyone, it's Chris, and welcome back to another episode of the Earley Show, sponsored by our friends over at Answering Legal. I'm really excited. We have a real treat today. We have Ben Glass on the Earley Show today. I'm truly pumped and excited to speak with Ben. He's the real deal. He is someone who has mentored me considerably in the last 5 years. We're going to learn a lot from Ben. So as always with all our guests, I encourage you, get those pencils sharpened. We're going to have plenty of writer-downers today. Ben's going to be dropping a lot of knowledge. I'm just really excited to geek out with him about entrepreneurship, about doing law better, differently, innovating, success, a lot of good stuff. So Ben, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, such a kind introduction, Chris. I love the name of your show too. I'm like, hey, it's Early Morning News. No, I'm really happy to be here. You know, we're recording this early in 2024, so it's a great time to talk about entrepreneurship, growing a practice, and mainly about finding happiness in the profession, which is what I'm really, at the end of the day, Ben Glass is about. How do lawyers find happiness in the profession?
It's possible. It clearly is, and you've shown that. So I always like to have attorney entrepreneurs on the show, only those who I have things in common with. And what I see you and I have in common together, we're both very, very hard workers. We're both really passionate lawyer entrepreneurs. We're both heavy, intense fans of direct response marketing. We've both been influenced by Dan Kennedy. We're both forever learners. And I know that we both have a ton of grit. We've overcome a lot. We've gotten through challenges. So that's why I wanted to ask you on the show. So I'm just really excited to chop it up with you. We were talking before the show started. I had Ken Hardison from Pilma on last month. And I thought you guys going back to back would be nice. You know, you're two different guys, two different personalities. But at the end of the day, you're trying to elevate attorneys and educate them through, information marketing, teaching attorneys how to scale and grow. So I'm really excited that you're able to jump on. So, I know your story, right? But for those who don't, could you share about your upbringing? What did mom and dad do, brothers and sisters? What did it look like growing up in the glass house?
I was so fortunate. So Chris, I'll be 66 next month. So give people some range. So I grew up in the 60s, right? In a house. I was the oldest of 7. Dad's an engineer. Mom was a stay-at-home mom who was a playground mom, school volunteer mom. And, my good fortune is relatively early on, I found soccer, and I was living in a hotbed of soccer in the United States, Annandale, Virginia. And through my youth, I was very shy. I was not very strong, but I played with a lot of really good players. And so soccer was the highlight, the center, and the everything of my life. I was fortunate to play on a national championship team. And when I was 18 years old, all of my teammates and I went to play D1 soccer. I played on scholarship at William & Mary. I will be celebrating this spring 50 years of refereeing soccer games, and I still am an active high school and youth soccer referee, Chris. Thought at age 16 that being a lawyer sounded pretty cool. I liked the Perry Mason shows and the F. Lee Bailey books of the 70s, and that just got me interested. And so from William & Mary, I went to George Mason Law School. I had a very typical path, undergrad. George Mason, met my wife, Sandy, while we were both at William & Mary. I was a year ahead of her, and graduated from Mason. Now, Mason, when I went to George Mason University, which is a tough school to get into now, but when I went there, Chris, it had its full ABA accreditation for a month. So it was a brand new accredited law school. And so, it didn't attract a lot of superstars, which is why they let me in. And people didn't come to George Mason back in let's see, this is now the 80s to hire. So, but I was very lucky. You probably don't know this. So I was interested in 2 things. I was good at 2 things. One, I was I loved tax law. I understood tax law, and all my classmates are like, oh, this is awful. I'm like, no, it seems very black and white to me. And so I could have been that, right? But I just happened to get a job clerking for one of really Virginia's best trial lawyers, Bill Arts, while I was in law school, and just got a taste of the personal injury, contingent fee world, the trial world. And so when I graduated from law school, I joined Bill and one of his partners who were forming a new firm, and they did a lot of insurance defense work. And so, but they were switching kind of to plaintiff's work, and they let me handle and be involved in a lot of litigation on the side of the insurance companies, which meant, Chris, I got to hang out with a lot of really good trial lawyers, and to be involved in trials from a very early stage and to actually try medical malpractice defense cases in the District of Columbia, which at that point was a haven for big verdicts, try those first chair in some cases, and do lots of depositions, travel around the country. So I was really fortunate that they let me do that. And I don't know that a young lawyer has all that latitude today, but things were just different between the insurance companies, between the guys and gals who were defending them back then. So those guys are transitioning to plaintiff's work. I'm cleaning up all the insurance defense work. And so for 12 years, I stayed with that firm in its various iterations. And then, an entrepreneurial seizure, which really was, I was raising my family. Family's getting bigger. We have 9 kids now, but I had 5 then. 3 of them were playing soccer, and I was coaching 3 teams. And here's the big reason why I started my own firm, is that the commute was a mess. And so I needed to be closer to my house, so I go out to the field and coach three teams during the week. So kind of just picked up and left and started a firm. So I was about 12 years out. So I graduated in 83, started in 1995, started BenGlassLaw. We've celebrated our 26th, I think, or 27th year in that game. 40 years as a lawyer overall. And here we are, still doing it, right, and enjoying it.
Your upbringing, what were some of your first jobs? Like, did you evidence an entrepreneurial bent when you were younger? Like, what?
A little bit. So I dealt out of my locker, and people go, oh my God, what's he talking about? So this is pre-internet. Remember, now I'm a soccer guy, pre-internet, pre-soccer sports stores. I'm ordering stuff from stores in New York, jerseys, shoes, socks, and selling them to my teammates on the high school soccer team out of my locker, selling them to other local soccer players, and keeping everything in a little black book, right? So that was entrepreneurial spirit. Second was, I mentioned earlier, when I was 16, I was encouraged to get my soccer referee license. That was the greatest thing ever. I didn't have to work for anybody. I worked for myself from a very early age. I had a driver's license at 16, and I worked really hard. And I was playing at a pretty high level, very high level actually, and refereeing every moment that I wasn't playing, which you could do when you're 16, 17, 18, 19. And early on, Chris, I was refereeing in some of the top senior amateur leagues in Washington, D.C. If you can imagine, like British Embassy against Argentine Embassy after Falkland Islands. Like, I was doing those games, which was hard. And that was really my only job. Like, I never had a real job until I got in college, and I worked part-time at a Holiday Inn, at the front desk. Because I made so much money refereeing, and it was stuff I really loved doing, and I did it totally on my own schedule. So I really, literally, Chris, I never had, I delivered papers for a bit, but I didn't have a job where you went and got paid by the hour. I didn't have one of those.
I knew I would have bet money you were a paper boy. How long were you a paper boy for?
I think it was a couple of years, because it wasn't the Washington. So in those days, again, if you're young, you couldn't even imagine this. In those days in D.C., in Northern Virginia, we got 2 newspapers. In the morning, you got the Washington Post. In the evening, you got the Washington Star or something. I can't remember. And so, but I didn't have either one of those. My buddy had one of those. I had the little Northern Virginia newspaper that literally, I'm riding my bike. I got like 30 people, but it's spread out over about 5 miles. And then in those days, every month, Chris, if you did this, you went and you knocked on the door and you collected the money for the month. Yeah. Like, there was no auto pay, which was good, because people would give you tips and stuff. But you had to show up and bang on the door and collect the money. So, yeah.
So I'm not surprised at that whatsoever. Every guest that I've had on the show, super successful. Everyone's been a paper boy. For entrepreneurs, a lot of them have begun their entrepreneurial journey is, slinging papers. And we're talking, you're in Virginia. I'm up in, Boston. The winters are nasty. It's not like delivering papers in, San Diego, or
Right.
something, it's not like pleasant conditions here.
literally had so back in those days like a Schwinn 1-speed bike with 2 baskets in the back that you'd take the papers, you'd roll them up, put a rubber band on them, and then when my buddy who had the afternoon larger newspaper, when he'd go on vacation, then I would screw up his route for 2 weeks while he was gone, and misdeliver papers and get those little pink complaint slips. But it was good.
Well, there are a lot of lessons in there, right?
Yeah.
It's about, the value of, at a really super young age, right? Making a buck, working hard for it, depositing money in the bank. Like that is just really big to me. I feel looking back.
Showing up on time. So
100%.
one of the things I do today, you probably knows, I coach and mentor young soccer referees. I wrote a book on this subject. And, a large part of that book is about, hey, it's really hard to be a good referee the first 2 or 3 years, but here's lessons. Show up on time, get the right uniform. Don't rely on your mom or dad to wash your stuff. Like make sure you're packed the night before. Make sure you know where you're going, all those disciplines. And so that was really good for me too, because I had to do all of that stuff, plus manage, 22 knuckleheads and spectators. When I got a little bit older, my dad would drive me down to DC, and we would park in the parking lot, like facing out. I swear to God, facing out, because some of those games were, let's just say, challenging. And when you're the only American in the whole field, and you're young, right, and you've got all sorts of nationalities playing, like right. I had the least authority walking out there, and so that was a good. I don't know how I survived it, but I did. I do know, I think. But it's such a great refereeing, being an umpire, that sort of stuff. Such a great skill. And Chris, if any of your listeners have children who are soccer referees and want to reach out to me, you can find me easy on LinkedIn. Like I'll send them my book. I've got a special toss coin. Like I really want to help that teenager get through the mindset parts of doing hard work. When crazy adults are oftentimes, screaming at you.
Let me ask you, well, those are conditions that create intestinal fortitude, toughness, grit. Let me ask you, I've been wrestling with this idea. I'd like to ask you, do you think a work ethic can be taught, or do you have it or you don't? Like a true, grind it, hustle work ethic?
I think it can be learned. So I think it can be taught because, because neither of my parents were entrepreneurial. My dad worked hard, but he had a job. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom raising 7 kids. And so, and not all of my brothers and sisters, like I'm the only entrepreneurial one, right? The others have jobs. So I think it's a little bit of luck. Like who do you run into? Okay. But we all run into a lot of people every day. And just for whatever reason, like what turns you on? My son, Brian, puts it best, like he never wanted to work in a job where he's getting paid the same as the next guy. He wants the opportunity to make more. So he tells a story about working as a server in a restaurant. Oh, yeah. Again, 2 people can be a server in a restaurant and one can make twice as much as the other because they know how to sell, right? And they know how to deliver service. So somehow that DNA, I do think it can be learned. And I do think there are so many models of people who grew up in environments. I had a good environment. I didn't have a hard environment. But so many models of people who grew up in hard environments who figured out the best thing in America is that you have the opportunity to go and take your product, your service, whatever, put it into the marketplace. The market will tell you whether it's a value or not. And if it is, run with it.
Yeah. I love that about certain waiting tables because I feel like waiting tables is a PhD in customer service, time management, efficiency, psychology. I really want my kids at some point to wait tables when they're old enough, because these rudimentary basic jobs, these slinging papers or just serving, right? Those are important jobs, but they're foundational things that you learn that translate. If I didn't do those 2 things, I'd be not as equipped to be an entrepreneur today. I really feel like that. So it's really interesting. You were the only entrepreneur from your family. Let me ask you, looking back, what were the biggest lessons you took from your mom and your dad? Right? As you sit here today, what did they each teach you?
I think it was just love. I mean, look, so this is the 60s, right? They were there. Not only were they there for the sporting events, my dad coached all of us at some point.
awesome.
We were neither rich nor poor. We never lacked for anything. I was the firstborn, so I guess I was the best, right? Highly trusted. And I think the thing is, and not all of my brothers and sisters went to college, but most did. This is never any. So one of the things we have carried over, I've sent 7 kids to 6 different Virginia universities, Chris. No pressure. Like I am not. My parents were not, and I am not the parent that goes, you got to get into this school, or this school is better than that school. I'm like, no. Like we're blessed in Virginia in many good schools. Like, hey, where you want to go? Like, awesome. Let's do it. And so my 7 kids that have graduated from university, 4 years, they're all productive. Some of them are doing things they never learned in the university, right? But I think the biggest thing was, like, my parents, like, they were not hyper on either extreme. They loved us. Again, Chris, these are the days where every parent in the neighborhood, like, had eyes on you. So my mom would find out things. How do you know that? Well, a little birdie told me. Where we would play at night. This is Americana. I write about this in my book, Play Left Fullback. It was like on my street, like we had 5 guys go to Division I sports. I grew up next to Scott Norwood, who had a wonderful career in the NFL as a kicker, and his brother was a great baseball player and played in the minor leagues. And his dad, we used to go to Senators games. His dad's a very famous baseball coach and was a minor league player himself. So I just had a really blessed. You don't have any control over who you're born to, where you're born, none of that. I recognize that I was blessed by that. And so I think just this, I wouldn't say they were strict. They didn't need to be strict. We were good kids. I had a fun childhood. Now, I was very shy. So the thing that people don't know is I was painfully shy. I did not want to be noticed, even through college, a little bit through law school. Like, and here's a guy who gets on stage, talks to lots of people, and does podcasts and all that stuff. Like, I think that can be learned as well. But I did, I was good at soccer, and I was average at everything else, or worse. Didn't have, I had friends, but not tons of friends.
Sure.
And here we are. So we can be successful when we find something in life that we like doing, that we're good at, and we get some feedback. I get some positive feedback as a youth soccer player. Got good positive feedback as a referee when I was young. Good positive feedback as a young trial lawyer. That's very helpful. So I would say, to us and the people that you and I talk to, the lawyers you and I talk to, like, never forget how important it is to recognize that next generation, and yes, teach, yes, encourage. But, when you tell someone, like, you did an awesome job, like that deposition you took, that was awesome. That brief you wrote, that was great. There's a couple things you might change here, but that can be it was very important to me in building my confidence as a trial lawyer and as now an old referee.
Well, you're still at it, and I love that. I'm really interested. So you were working for a firm, and then was it 95 that you struck out on your own and hung a shingle?
Yeah, 83 licensed, 95 left and started October of 1995. Yeah.
So you were cutting your teeth from 83 to 95, trying cases, getting exposure to trial law, right? Learning from some
getting good results. Yeah,
you're getting good results. You're probably getting kicked in the teeth, but you're also winning. So it's a good mix of, winning and losing and just getting a feel for the courtroom, and that's really important. I feel like I'm fascinated. So in 95, you hang your shingle, and tell me if I'm wrong, but at that point, you hadn't yet found Dan Kennedy or a better way to do things. You were sort of just lawyer advertising.
Correct.
Or typical vanilla. How many years were you doing it that way before you had an epiphany to do it?
Yeah. So when I left, I took cases, and so we had a runway a bit, and did pretty well with those cases. What I didn't know was what I didn't know, which is like, oh my gosh, how do you actually go and get cases? Now, this is pre-internet, Chris. So this is the yellow pages. This is if you had money, TV and radio, but there wasn't a lot of other media. You had referrals, and so you would go to bar event meetings and stuff, and people got to know you. So the epiphany came when the cases ran out, and I'm like, oh crap, now what do I do? Yeah. And just as I was blessed to be born in Annandale in 1958 and grew up in the 60s in Annandale, Virginia, out of the blue, I got a letter for a sales letter for something called magnetic marketing. Now, it's not entirely out of the blue, Chris, because being curious, I was a subscriber to the success literature. So Nightingale Conant, kind of famous company back in the day, tapes, $49 tapes, Zig Ziglar.
When did you start that? When did you start exposing yourself to that stuff?
It must have been when I was at the old firm, but I can't remember why. I just must have seen an ad someplace, you know. And here's the thing, Chris, that my first couple of years through the success literature, the Napoleon Hill stuff, like I didn't understand any of it, even though I would listen to it. Yeah. I didn't have anybody else in my life who was mimicking or modeling or encouraging that. And so it was weird because I was still interested. I was listening, but I didn't know that there was conferences. You know, I went to a Tony Robbins conference at one point. Holy cow, like, oh my God, a whole arena full of people that are crazy and interested in business. And I started to go, you know, so I bought Dan Kennedy's magnetic marketing thing, which at that point was like the most it was $300, the most I'd ever invested in a product, I think, in my life. And I would send it back because there was nothing in it about lawyers. My business is different, you know? And I had audio tapes, and my car back then, tape player, and I listened. And I listened again. I listened about 3 times through this whole set of tapes. And I said, I don't understand everything Dan's saying. I don't even understand the words he's using, but I figured this out, that if I could get to understand it, it would change my life. And so I started getting Dan's newsletter. I started buying products from Dan. I eventually drove to Cleveland, right, to go to an event that Dan was running. And what Dan was teaching was how do you stand out? How do you be different, stand out in a crowded market? Well, rule number 1 is look around what everybody else is doing, Chris, and don't do that. Because you can play in that big pond if you want, but they all had more money than I did. Yeah. And so I started to create, Dan teaches creating direct response, you know, mechanism, lead generation, widgets, books. I started to write books and, you know, your automobile case, the 5 deadly sins of your auto case, and how to find the right lawyer. And I was the first one to really be doing that in the market, really.
In the legal space. Yeah, nobody was doing
space. That's right. Yeah. And there was a couple of people at that time that were teaching that into the legal space, but they weren't lawyers. A lot of their stuff was so, I won't say unethical, but it had so many things in it that just would rub people the wrong way. Yeah. And so I was able to bring first to my practice lead generation books and stuff that made sense so that when somebody called here, they could say, oh, do you know Mr. Glass? He wrote the book on cards and cases in Virginia. Can I send you a copy? Like really simple stuff, but it worked. And, you know, we've taught that. And now since that, you know, a lot of people use these things, it is a standard piece of the arsenal for those of us who are not spending millions and millions of dollars on TV ads and other stuff like that. It still is. And it's good. It's good because it works. So that was my epiphany. And then as I was working with Dan and his partner, Bill Glazer, and I said, well, there's nobody teaching this to lawyers. And there's no lawyer teaching this to lawyers at this time. And I said to them one day on a call, I said, how do you know when your stuff is good enough? And I had been sending them my stuff. They go, your stuff is good enough. And so we're starting in the 20th year of great legal marketing, but I literally started that, you know, in the back of the room at a Kennedy conference thinking, gee, could I start to teach some of these entrepreneurial, at that point, Chris, just advertising. It was just advertising for PI lawyers. That's all it was. Could I start to show some of this to other lawyers? And I had a bunch of people who followed me at the time because I did some speaking for Virginia trial lawyers and some other groups. And so people knew there was a small cohort of lawyers, it seemed, Chris, at the time, who were interested in advertising differently. And it just grew from there. And then we, you know, the family lawyer and the immigration lawyer, they would say, will this work for me? And yeah, should, right? And so that's how great legal marketing starts to grow. So I've been blessed with mentors and then finding people outside of legal who are my long-term 20-year friends who are all like, we're all born of the Dan Kennedy world. So Ken Hardison also is a Kennedy protege, and Ken does fantastic work with PILMA. There are a number of others, Richard James, right? Fantastic work. Also, like we've all been in groups together. We've been in mastermind groups together, I think, with Dan Kennedy. And so we are, all of us, and you as well, continuing to spread the word to lawyers that you can have a life of happiness. You can design a business that fits what your definition of happiness is. And don't let anybody tell you that you have to do something differently, that you have to serve this population or do this kind of work, because you don't. There's no rule that says you do.
I gotta tell you, I think it was super smart to bring us into the legal space because it wasn't really there. And so that I thought was really creative. So it sounds like almost like a grassroots, like organic thing.
Yeah.
Just, it wasn't like you didn't flip a switch and start GLM, Great Legal Marketing. You organically caught fire. The wheel was spinning faster, the flywheel.
It did, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, we just started putting together a mastermind group and, having people come and the other thing I do, like even pre-GLM, like you probably don't know this, but when I started my practice as a solo, the very first thing I did, Chris, is I invited all my friends. So all my friends were plaintiffs, personal injury lawyers, like I was, right? And we would meet monthly in my office. And I would buy the pizza, or you would pay for the pizza, or whatever. And we would just throw our cases on the table and talk about it. So if you think about it, this was competitors in a local market. Again, this is pre-email, the internet. If you wanted to learn anything, you had to go to a CLE event. And right from the beginning, although I did not call it a mastermind, that's exactly what it was. It was people getting together who had abundance mindset, who said, yeah, let's try to solve some problems together.
So I discovered GLM in 2019. I was having a terrible day at work, and I was like, I'm not going to work tomorrow. My wife was like, you're not going to work, because I was just, that was unheard of. And I searched online. I don't know what I searched, but I found GLM. I said, Rory, I'm thinking about going to DC for this conference. And that was like weird. Like, I don't go to conferences. I don't get on airplanes. And I did that, Ben. And everything, I can tell the listener with full candor here, my life changed. Most importantly, my marriage changed. I'm a better dad. But my business, Ben, totally took off when I discovered there's a different way to make these widgets in law. There's a better way to do law, right? It doesn't have to be the conventional way. And so I appreciate your teachings because it's authentic stuff, right? It's genuine, and it's not about the law. It's about leading a better life, a fulfilling life. I'm a totally different dude than I was from 2018. Like I'm the same. I'm Chris Earley, but I'm so much bigger thinking. You talk about competitive.
Yeah.
I used to never talk to my competitors about stuff. Now I literally today I'm talking to my competitors about how we run our PI firms, because that's just like bigger thinking. And a lot of lawyers are like, are you crazy? And maybe people listen to this like, are you nuts talking to your competitors about stuff? I grow with an abundance mindset, and I know you have as well, and you teach that. It's about your mindset. I think I mentioned this recently in the podcast. Everyone should order today on Amazon Think and Grow Rich. That's what started for me. That was my first success literature.
Yeah.
And then it was like the fire was lit and it was over. It was like game on. It affected everything from customer service to time management. I literally speak to organizations about time management now, and I run courses. Getting into helping other lawyers basically. But I love what you did and what you're doing now. I believe it's gotten more competitive, because when you started, I think it was a smaller vertical. Now it seems like an industry which is mushroomed, if I'm not mistaken.
It's hugely competitive. And, I mentioned a couple of names earlier. In Tampa, I spoke for the SMB team, Andy Stickle and Bill Hauser, and they're running a really big operation, bundling services, like we'll do your advertising for you, with coaching and marketing. And they are very, very smart people. And the other names that I mentioned, Arjan and Richard and Mike Mogul and Ken Hardison and others. Like, I don't mean to diss anybody by not mentioning them right now, but these are really smart people. But I think, Chris, out of the whole lawyer market, particularly small law firm market, we still, as a group, have only touched a tiny percentage of those who are out there. And so and I know this because every single day, Chris, I have lawyers that come to me like you did many years ago and go, oh my gosh, I've never heard of like this kind of thinking. And like, how could you not have heard of it? We're all talking about it. We think we're all talking about it. We're all on LinkedIn, and we think everyone's paying attention to us. Well, it turns out that's not true. And I think what I've done, Chris, is to give lawyers just permission to think this way first. Like, because law school doesn't do it and the profession doesn't do it. And no. Your life is important and your happiness is important, you and your family. Like, those are the primary. Now let's design something, because if you're happy with what you're doing, Chris, and you can attract great teammates to help you do it, and they're happy by coming to work, the client will be well served. It's 100% guaranteed. Yeah. But if you're not really happy and your team is coming into a chaotic environment with an unhappy owner, that's why lawyers get in trouble. That's why consumers get bad ideas about lawyers. Oh, my lawyer doesn't keep me informed and my lawyer is not doing anything. Well, that's because the lawyer is not happy and the team isn't happy. So that's what I've done. We call it great legal marketing, but really it's this whole mindset. And if you accept the mindset, then the tools make a lot of sense. If you don't accept the mindset, the tools aren't. So whatever anybody is selling isn't going to work if you're not really energized as the lawyer coming to work.
Yeah, I think the mindset, we just talked about Think Go Rich. It's the mindset. And I've talked about this with other guests on the show. The mindset of the business owner trickles down to everything, everybody in the organization. If it's one person or 50 people, if you're a miserable SOB, you're going to make everybody else miserable. If you're walking, head high and, smile on your face and feeling good about life, people are going to pick up on that. So I always tell the lawyers, be careful how you act in the office. If you're having a bad day, you can't bring it into work, because everyone's going to feel, Chris is having a bad day. Ben's pissed. Like, that's not good. So the business owner has to be super careful.
You have to be careful. Yeah, and look, this is work. Like, all of our lives are a work in progress. And as I was saying it to you, I think before we went live, is Brian and I, my son, who's a 50% owner of the law firm, and he's in GLM as well now. It's like, we work really hard. We're not doing so much of the legal work, but we're doing the building of a company. So our whole theme is build a place where people will thrive. Because if the owners thrive, the team thrives, and the clients will thrive. If you solve for all three of those things, great life. Let's go, right? And it takes work, because these are skills that we don't learn in law school. We have to go out and pay for coaches and join mastermind groups, I believe, and read literature. But it's fun and it's worth it. I'll tell you, it's worth it because what it does is allows the number of choices that I have in a day, or the number of choices I have in a season, to expand. And the more choices you have, Chris, as a human being, then the happier your life is going to be. It's those who don't feel that they have a lot of choices who oftentimes fall into misery.
Let me ask you this. I'm curious. I'm going to ask you in a second how much you've spent, you think, on your self-education, right? Success education. But before I ask that, think about that for a moment. I know it's a big number.
It's a big number, I think. Yeah.
I'm positive it is. What's the biggest lesson you took from Dan Kennedy, if you had to just distill it to one lesson in particular?
Yeah, so the biggest lesson from Dan is you have the permission to live your life as you see fit. And so he introduced me to Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, and I'm a huge fan, and I will debate anybody. Because here's the funny thing, Chris. It's like, if you say Ayn Rand to a bunch of lawyers, they'll go, oh, no, she's horrible. I go, great. You've read it? You've read the literature and you want to come and talk about it? They go, oh, no, I haven't. I go, well, let me tell you something. For 20 years, I've been preaching basically the philosophy of Ayn Rand. Your life is the primary. You have a right to your own life and your own happiness, and there's a way to get it. I've been preaching that. Lawyers go, oh, that's wonderful. That's great. So that was the thing with Dan. Like, don't follow the crowd just because it's the crowd. Just because, let's say, plaintiffs' lawyers think this way doesn't mean you have to think this way. In fact, you have to have your own independent judgment. And so that was the biggest thing. Because Dan teaches a lot of strategies, of course, a lot of techniques. But it's this whole mindset thing, Chris, which I have adopted, which is you have one life. You go from beginning to end, no control over the beginning, where you were born to. You have some control of the end through your life habits, maybe how many years you'll get, right? But you don't really know whether you have tomorrow. So let's live today. Let's maximize our choices for today. Let's maximize our happiness. Let's be, let's be good to our families, good to our teammates, good to the world, right? Because the other thing about Kennedy is put value into the world first. Like, the only true gauge is whether it's not how many people stand up and give you claps. It's how many people want to buy your thing, whether you're selling legal services or widgets or coaching or whatever. The market is the true and only gauge of how valuable you are to the world. That's the big thing. And he and I we're friends. In fact, I'm co-authoring with him now. I think it's the 3rd or 4th edition of No BS Time Management for Entrepreneurs. Will be out.
When does it come out?
It comes out this year. He's got a number that are coming out. I think it's towards the second half of the year, maybe Q3. And we'll do some promotions around it. But he had invited me to be a co-author. I wrote, 30 or 40% of the book.
Amazing.
Or rewrote parts of it. Yeah.
I'll be buying it. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Write her down, or people should be picking that up when it drops, no question. So but quickly, I just want to ask. So I feel like the Dan Kennedy mindset of like be disruptive, be a little bit different, plays so well into law because we're all vanilla doing things. Even now, when things have advanced quite a bit, maybe in the past 20 years, it's still a very vanilla profession. So if you inject Dan Kennedy direct response, this disruptive, innovative, progressive thinking, it's like, whoa, this is really standing out from the pack, right? It's just such a good field to leverage that because everyone's doing the same stuff. And it's easy.
Yeah. And here's the cool thing, Chris, is that everybody can do this because what I have done really well with the law firm is inject my personality. So my unique set of gifts, interests, desires, and talents. Like I have that package. And you have your package, and yours is different from mine, and nobody else has yours, nobody else has mine. And so getting lawyers to feel comfortable being you and presenting not the lawyer you, but you, Chris Earley, to the world, right? And go, here I am, I'm Chris, here's what I stand for, here's how I run my practice. I got a long line of people out the door who want to get in, and come pitch me on why I should take your case, right? That's a really cool position to be in. Yeah. And I think that a lot of lawyers, again, lawyers got to be lawyers because they're really smart at test taking, issue spotting, following rules, basically. That's how you don't get through law school without being able to do those things. And then it's hard if you don't have this entrepreneurial DNA, which I think it can be grown and developed. It's hard to start thinking and then be brave enough about, oh, really? You're going to who asked you to write a book? We're always very careful. We don't step over the bounds of legal ethics of advertising and stuff. But there's a billion ways to say, I'm the best lawyer for this case in Virginia. There's a billion ways to say that. And we use all billion.
Sure.
Without violating anything.
No. And Ben, as well, you don't have, when it comes to Dan Kennedy and all this, success literature, you don't have to be an entrepreneur. You don't have to be a law firm owner to benefit. We talk about time management, customer service, marketing. This is how associates could generate business and, work, high level customer service. So it's not just the business. I feel like a lot of times we talk about in this room and other rooms, like it's the business owner. It's just law can be done differently no matter where you are in law. But there is a universal better way to do this thing. And I feel like truly like it's a shame for lawyers to not embrace a better way. But I think we said it starts with the mindset. But related to that, you've spent a fortune. You don't have to tell me the exact number. I'm sure it's a lot. You kind of feel like, but you've spent a lot on coaching, your development, your books, your Conan. That's a significant investment. And it's a scary investment, right? Because like sometimes you level up and you go into a bigger mastermind. And do you have an idea of what you've spent roughly?
So I'm probably in Kennedy's at least 200 or 250K club. That's just Kennedy, right? Yeah. So that doesn't include like what we're investing every year in EOS. I've been in Brian Kurtz's mastermind. So we spend a ton. But here you just made a great point, which is almost every time I quote couldn't afford it or it was a stretch for me to be in the room with these people at that level. And every time I have benefited immensely, quite if you want to talk about ROI, immensely from like the first meeting. Yeah. Because all it takes, I know this sounds trite, all it takes is like one idea and one new case. Okay.
It's true.
But hanging out with people who think bigger, better, faster than I do. And Chris, when I'm in those rooms, I want to know not just like, okay, what are you doing on YouTube? Like, that's kind of cool. Like, how do you live your life? Like, who are you reading? What are your habits? Who do you look to? What conferences are you going to? I talked to to one guy who was in a $65,000 a year mastermind group. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Tell me about it. He goes, well, here's what you know. Everybody who's in that room is willing to pay $65,000 to be in that room. So there's some pretty smart cookies in that room. And just hang out with people who, again, doing things bigger, better, and faster than you are, you can't help but be drawn up into that atmosphere of entrepreneurism, of risk-taking in certain cases, but also sharing. Because the other thing you find out in these mastermind groups, for the most part, these are the most giving, abundant, sharing individuals. So my very good friends in the world are from the Kennedy world, who will do anything for me. Hey, I need a speaker over here. Great, I'll fly there for free. Like, I'll come and speak. Right? So, or come down to my place and hang out for a couple of days and watch my business, or come to my conference, right, and watch my business. They're the most giving people. So at that level, there's so much abundance thinking. I mean, it's all no limits thinking. I mean, they're not thinking, well, if I tell Ben, like one of my secrets, that's going to be less for me. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is just it pulls you up. So I want to be the dumbest person in the room, right? I want to be like the most coolest person in the room, because I'm going to be pulled up by the collective, by the mastermind that has taken over, basically, right? And for some, look, honestly, Ben, for some people listening to this, it may sound like hooey, but like read a few of these books and just be open, like you were open back in the day.
Yeah.
Like I was open in 2019 because I just was thirsting for more. Right, my wife was like, "What the hell's gotten into?" Because I was talking about weird stuff, like new concepts, right?
You didn't want to go to work the next day, so
right.
But like, yeah, it's like coming to work now. You got your hoodie on there, right? I dressed up because I was going to be on. I wore a collared shirt today because I was with you. But usually, like Brian and I are here in t-shirts or hoodies, and it's fun. It is work. Like, it is work to get to work. Have been, right? And some days it's still like beat your head against the wall, frustrating. In a part, I think the frustration, Chris, is we were talking before we went live, like about vendors and stuff, people who serve the legal community. I need you to go as fast as I am. I need you to be going faster than I am and giving me some ideas. I don't need to be telling you everything. I don't need someone who can just execute on my ideas. I need people who can move fast, who can make me a priority. I know that's a big ask, but that's the impatience of high performers. We don't understand why people don't get excited about our stuff.
No, well, obviously we're juiced up. We geek out on this. It energizes us, but like it's not for everyone. Yeah. So I try to, I was talking to our friend Len Spada. He and I had lunch. Yeah. And Len and I were like, sometimes we have to like tone it down if we're with people. Maybe don't want to talk about like direct response marketing or customer service. Like they don't care. So it's like I have to be mindful of that. Like pull it back.
Yeah, well, that's why it's important to get in rooms where you can geek out with your buddies, your girlfriends on that, right? But yeah, like Len's he's doing great. He's growing his practice, and he's again the most humble, sharing guy you would know. Like you wouldn't know till you've hung out with him for a while, like how big and substantial that practice is and how much he's grown it. And sometimes it's like meeting the one vendor who can bring in his case, he's really grown his Hispanic marketing and his Hispanic section of his practice because he met a vendor and they clicked and it made sense and boom.
So, he and I are friends. We're direct competitors, man.
Yeah.
It's all good because we're talking about stuff. I have multiple other friends, right? Friends who we collaborate on stuff because we're thinking no better than anyone else, but differently than most attorneys, right? So just, I know what GLM is. Can you just tell the listener who's never heard of GLM, just totally, not aware. What do you guys do? Who's an avatar? Who's an ideal client for GLM?
So we're by and large a coaching organization. So we do not sell websites, pay-per-click. We do not sell any services per se. We're the ones that lawyers running solo and small firms, typically, Chris, starting at maybe $500K to $5 million of revenue. That's our sweet spot. With one or two owners, not more than one or two owners. Typically, they have families. And they are trying to figure out that, and they're good lawyers, like whatever the practice area is, they're good at that part. They're trying to figure out, how do I up the happiness level for me and my spouse or life partner and my kids? Like, that's our space. And so what we're really good at, I think, is number one, looking at any lawyer and law firm and trying to understand their practice and go, Chris, here's the next place. If you're going to go spend an hour or a dollar, here's where you go next. Because there's a whole line of things that are probably useful and valuable. But if you skip 5 steps down the line and buy this next thing over here, when you don't have a foundation, you don't have good intake, you don't have a good CRM, you're going to waste your money. And then you're going to be mad at that vendor who sold you that thing. Yeah. So we are good at helping law firms figure out the next step. And our members, Chris, although we have, as do anybody with a room now, a lot of different strategies. But our top members, they get really good at 1 or 2 or 3 things. You don't have to be good at everything. But in terms of advertising and marketing, we have people that are great at the web or great at newsletters or great at human relationships. Here's the thing. When we look at our numbers here at the law firm, like most of our cases and the vast majority of our money comes not from the internet. It comes from human beings who we have actual real relationships with in Northern Virginia. And so we're like, dude, why are we spending all this money over here when we should invest more in humans, human capital, right? Human marketing. And then, so we teach them that. And then, once you get the marketing down and once you eliminate the mistakes, clean up your website, have someone who can answer the phone who's a salesperson, now you have to have better processes and you have to know how to hire and retain people. And so we have a couple level mastermind groups, but at our top level, we're not talking so much about marketing. We're talking about life, generational transition. What do you really, Len Spitta, okay, where are you going skiing this month, Len? Great. How's the office running? Perfect. Great. Those are the conversations we have there. And our hero group, which is the one group down below, it is a lot of marketing. So those folks are basically, probably under 7 figures in total revenue, smaller firms, but we're getting their marketing fixed and we're teaching them how to develop systems so that the lawyer can free up his or her time to do, what are we paid to do, Chris? We're paid to be creative with our clients' problems. That's really the differentiator, right? Because anybody can answer interrogatories. And frankly, Chris, most people can try cases better than you, better than me. Even though we're good trial lawyers, there's people that can do that better.
No doubt.
We're paid to strategically think about how the client's problem can be solved. And the more that we can free up our time and our brain space to have that thinking while we're also attracting great people to work here, right? That's where the money is, and that's where the happiness is. Relatively easy, I think, these days, to generate more cases. Yes, it's very competitive. Yes, there's a lot of money in the market, but people overlook this human capital, this human marketing. We've got this training space here. We invite all sorts of local businesses into our space. We have really good relationships. And we have someone whose their job at the law firm is managing the people relationships with all of our referral partners, lawyers, and non-lawyers out in the space. So again, I think what we're good at is show me your firm, tell me what you're doing, and I can help you eliminate bad spend first. And now here's where we go next. Your dollar spent here, your hour spent here. All right. And just move on up the ladder. Again, up to about 5 million or so. That's our sweet spot in terms of firm revenues. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, it's a shame because we don't learn this stuff in law school. You have to seek this out. You have to find it, right? And learn it because they don't teach you about spreadsheets and data and KPIs and intake. I mean, it's a discipline in of itself. It could be, it's an extensive body of work. And you and I, as you said at the top of the show, we have this comment. We're forever learners, right? Again, I said before, I want to be the dumbest guy in the room. Let me ask you this. So you started humbly, you had to practice, your cases in 95 were dwindling down, you're at a totally different level back then. I want to ask you today, when you get on stage and people, very smart, successful, driven, ambitious attorneys who have very little time on their hands, get on airplanes to go hear you speak, how does that feel to you? I mean, what's that like?
I think that's my life's work. So I've worked for many years with Sammy Chong. Sammy's my personal corporate executive mindset coach. And, kind of years ago, as we got to know each other, I was born to inspire you. I was born to inspire other people, whether you're a teenage referee or, a lawyer. So that's my space. Again, the shyest kid in high school and college and law school, getting on stage, giving people permission to live their own lives, and then giving them the tools to be able to do that so they can increase the number of choices in their life. I like doing that the best. I like doing interviews like this because I don't have to prepare a talk,
Sure.
but you're going to ask really great questions. And, hopefully one person at least who hears this thinks, oh, wow, like there is happiness. I'll tell you one thing that's very sad. So in my disability work, I've represented a number now of, let's say, young 30s to mid 30s, big law lawyers making lots of money, but something happens and they can't work anymore, or they can't work at that pace. And I'm like, man, did you ever even think about like a small firm? Like, no. I had a guy once who was making like $185K, working a bazillion hours a year, 7 days a week, forever. And I'm like, dude, there's easier ways to make $185K. He goes, no, there's not. I go, actually there is. And so that's sad, Chris, when you have lawyers who are smart, Harvard Law School, all of these, they took the path, right? But at 5, 6, 7, 8 years, 9 years in the profession, they're out of the profession. They're very smart people. They're caring people. They could do a lot. And they're out of the profession because they've never seen what you and I have seen, which is you can run these small businesses, do work you like with people you like, and get highly compensated for it. Like, that's a formula. And that's what Ben, you asked me, like, how does that feel? It feels great to be able to have guys like you say, as I have said to Dan Kennedy many times, you changed my life. Like, when I discovered you, Dan Kennedy, you changed the trajectory of my life. I got about 3 or 4 people in my life who I can say that about. Small number, definitely have. And so yeah, no doubt. It is fun to get the feedback that I have changed the trajectory of people's lives. It's not everybody, of course. It is the man or woman in the mirror who's most responsible for change. But that's how I get my jam, that, and refereeing games and getting people yell at me, tell me how stupid I am.
I mean, but it gives you big purpose, right? I think
100%. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: are you currently? So how do you level up? So like Ben today, like what are you reading? What are you immersed in to? Because you got to level up, right? You can't just like stay status quo. People are looking to you for insight. So like, what are you into right now?
So I read probably 70 books a year. I think, last year I went to Russell Brunson's Funnel Hacking Live conference. Nice. I think hands down it's the best thing I've ever been to.
Really?
If you haven't been to that, next year it's virtual in October. Then the next spring after that in 25, it's in Vegas. And here's why. 5,000 entrepreneurs, Chris, all different walks of life, right? Making money because they found something they were very passionate about. They studied hard to get to it, and they're excited about sharing their journey. So that's one, like that whole world. We continue to be deeply embedded in EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System. We run that in both businesses. We've got coaches that we pay a lot of money to in both businesses. And again, so here's a test for a coach. Like, if you hire a coach, like, the promise should be that within X number of months or 12 months or whatever, like, my fee becomes irrelevant to you. Sure. And 100%, the coaches that I paid the most to over my life, the groups I have paid the most to be in over my life, the fee has become irrelevant because of what I get out of that. So today, what are we doing? Like, we are trying to maximize and leverage AI in as many different ways as we can, as are many people. But Chris, you go to a normal lawyer seminar and there's people that are going, what is AI? Like the only thing they've heard about AI is lawyers getting in trouble. Like, we're trying to maximize that.
Yeah.
We're trying to go back and figure out what's the next place in lawyer marketing because of AI. Like, our website's going to become irrelevant. Some of the literature, some of the smart people are saying, we keep investing all this money in, quote, SEO and websites. Who knows? Because Google wants to own the world. So we're trying to stay. So those are the groups, the webinars, the people I read, the people I listen to. That's where we are right now. That, and then I think the other thing, which is a bit of a challenge, is how do we raise up the next generation of lawyers in our firms to be leaders? Because we're leaders and we're entrepreneurs, and we think we're pretty good leaders. But actually teaching leadership, Chris, that's a new skill set for us. And so now we're investing money in buying expertise to either coach us or coach our lawyers on leadership skills. There's always learning to be done. But it's good. Like Clayton Mask, who's the CEO of Infusionsoft, told me years ago, he says, Ben, when we were 3 guys in a garage, like we had problems. Now I'm running this huge operation. We have problems. I like the problems I have today. So Ben likes the problems he has today. No, not every day is perfect, but it's the problem solving is interesting. The challenges I still find interesting. I honestly do not find, and I don't do interrogatories and depositions and stuff like that. Like I direct a lot of that for others to do. Right. And I still have a lot to give in that space because of my experience. But I would, shoot me if I had to do a deposition.
You and me both, brother. Me and you both, man. Oh, no.
And it's okay. So some lawyers will hear that and they go, well, that doesn't sound like he's not a real lawyer anymore. And what I've learned is, no, it's okay because the client will be well served. We'll all make more money. The client will get a better result when I've got people who are the Ben Glass of old, who are excited about making depositions or trying cases. And that's what I think those of us who are, getting up in years, like that's what we're trying to do. Because most lawyers, Chris, as you know, when they retire, like the firm ends, like there's nothing there to pass on. We built a business that we think will outlast us. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to wrap up soon. I want to respect your time. A couple kind of quick hitting questions.
Yeah.
Which book has had the biggest impact on your life?
Atlas Shrugged for sure. Okay. And then the second one is everyone has to read Deep Work. So Cal Newport's book, Deep Work. Go read that book. I read it once every year. Yeah.
What keeps you up at night?
Not much. I fall asleep on the sofa at about 9:30 at night. So there's not a lot that keeps me up. I swear to God, here's my nighttime routine as I look at the CrossFit workout for the next day. I go to bed, imagine myself getting out of bed, even though it's cold, and getting to the gym and doing that workout. So I sleep, one of my gifts is I sleep really well. Nothing keeps me up at night, except maybe kids coming in at 11 o'clock at night. No, I don't have that. I don't have that worry.
What time do you get up in the morning? I'm up at like 3:34.
No, I don't get up that early. So when I had kids getting on the school bus, I was at the gym by 5 or 5:15. Now I'm at the gym at 7, so I'm usually out of bed by 5:30. Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, for real.
And look, another thing I took from you was journaling. I'm an obsessive journaler. I journal every day. Yeah. Do you meditate or no?
A lot. The cool thing is now go back and read some of your entries from 2, 3, 4 years ago. It's really it's fascinating. I joke with my kids. I've given you a lot of material for my funeral. So
it's so cool. Do you meditate or no?
I've tried meditation. I don't really meditate. No, not deliberately.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Let me ask you this. What's your greatest success in life so far?
I think the greatest success in life is my kids who are out of the house are productive. Again, have found their space in the world by and large. I've got 7 grandkids. There's nothing better than going to grandchildren's sports events, Chris. You don't have to line the field. You don't have to set up the nets. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You just show up and watch. So I think watching your children learn to parent is huge, right? And now seeing them discover, because they always got to come back to you, right? They're still calling mom and dad, like, what do I do about this? How do I buy insurance? The first grade teacher said this to, little Johnny, what do I do with this? So that's a cool, that is my greatest, excitement or happiness from life is watching your children now be successful.
That's what it's all about. And one thing of many things I've taken from you is the business is set up to facilitate my life. It's not the other way around. Yeah. A lot of lawyers, they, work, kind of enslaved to the business or the practice, right? I look at it as like, how can I manipulate this entity, right? Structure, right?
Yeah.
Not the people, of course. My people are rock stars. They're just like fantastic rock stars. I mean, just like the business. How can I engineer it so it facilitates my life? That's a big thing. A lot of lawyers don't. grasp of that.
Sure.
You know?
Look, and it's working. You're not perfect at it, and none of us are perfect at it. And,
No.
and we try to minimize unexpected departures, but they happen too, right?
All the
And they
time.
can put a hole. Yeah.
Punched in the mouth all the time as an entrepreneur. But like you said, these are better problems. They're more sophisticated problems, more visionary type things. So, but it took time to elevate to that level, and I think that's a big challenge. How can people get in touch with you? How can they look into GLM?
So you can go to greatlegalmarketing.com. You can see what we have going now. I'm both Brian and I are pretty big on LinkedIn, posting almost daily, so I'm easy to get a hold of there. If you just Google Ben Glass referee, you'll see some neat referee stuff too. And part of my world is trying to encourage sportsmanship, let's just say. And so you go on some of my YouTube channels, you'll see crazy parents, and we try to embarrass them, not by saying anything about them, but by just showing them.
Have you ever had like a physical? I'm just curious, like a physical altercation. Has anyone ever gotten like physically combative with you?
Well, I've not been assaulted, but yeah, particularly back in the day, when you're as old as I am, you do carry some stature of this guy must have some experience. He's not an idiot. But when you're the only American and you're young on a field or a park of no other American, they're all from other country, experienced, knowledgeable players. That was hard. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Never needed a police escort. Just my dad parking the car to exit.
Ready to go.
Yeah.
It's getting out of the parking lot. Ben, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Talk to you anytime, Chris. Thank you.
So that's it for this episode of The Earley Show. Be sure to check out more episodes of our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel.